All 4K footage is not created equal, and even though it can look pretty darn good, there's actually a really big difference between 4K footage that's filmed on like your phone or a small action camera versus a full-size, full-frame camera, maybe like a mirrorless or a DSLR. This video was filmed and uploaded in 4K, so for the sake of the comparison, I recommend that you set your player at the highest resolution possible. So it's probably no secret that I've been using and loving the Canon EOS R, which is what I'm filming this right now in beautiful, crisp, super high bitrate 4K. And the 4K capabilities of the EOS R are a little bit controversial. There are a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and I really wanted to see what this camera could do, but I don't want to just test it out on its own. I want to put it up against another really popular 4K camera. So even as a Canon fan, it's kind of hard for me to ignore the Sony A7 III, which came out in 2018, and I don't know of another camera in the past few years that has been more well received and more positively reviewed than the A7 III. So for about $2,000, you get one heck of a camera. This thing has great image quality, great autofocus, 120 frames per second at 1080. It's got full frame 4K where you can use the full sensor, 2 SD card slots, in-body image stabilization, and it's just one heck of a great camera. If you know me, you know the things I don't like about this camera are the battery life. It's terrible, and the stupid Sony flip out screen, which is just a terrible design that I cannot stand. One day Sony will make a camera that has an actual tilty flippy screen, and then they will be hard to top. But until then, the EOS R is roughly the same price. It has a lot of the same features. It does not have in-body image stabilization. It does not have 2 SD card slots. It does not have 120 frames per second at 1080. But it does have Canon's dual pixel autofocus. It does have 4K. It's cropped 4K, but it is a much higher bitrate 4K. So what we're really getting into when we're talking about the 4K capabilities between these two cameras, do you have any idea how hard it is to say 4K capabilities? It took me like 4 times to get that right. The big difference is that the Sony A7 III films its 4K at 100 megabits per second, whereas the EOS R films its 4K at 480 megabits per second. That is more than 4 times the data that is in the 4K files on this camera. Even Sony's new A7R Mark IV still films at 100 megabits per second. So even though the EOS R does use cropped 4K, that higher bitrate is kind of crazy. That puts the EOS R in this weird space above most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, and like right below dedicated cinema cameras like the Canon C series or even some of the more advanced cameras, which means that it's a really good choice for a lot of people if they're getting it as a second camera in addition to one of the bigger cinema series cameras. And I'm actually pretty new to even paying attention to bit rates myself, because in this day and age, all cameras look pretty amazing. But if you really do want to focus on those finer points, and that's where things like bitrate become really important, because that can actually be the deciding factor if you're trying to figure out which camera's image quality has an edge on the other. Bitrate can determine overall image quality. It can determine how easy or flexible the image is to color grade. It can affect dynamic range. It basically is just putting a whole bunch more information into those files, which then can benefit you when you get into the editing process after filming. So now it's time for the direct 4K comparison. In addition to bit rates and all that fancy stuff, the lens on your camera probably has the most massive impact on your image quality. So it would not be fair to use the Sony with like a cheapo lens and the Canon with a super nice lens, because that probably wouldn't be actually an accurate representation. So in addition to being able to borrow the A7 III, I was able to borrow a couple of nice lenses. The Canon 70-200 2.8 IS version 2 and the Sony G Master 70-200 2.8. But these lenses are way too long to use indoors, especially with the EOS R's 4K crop. So I'm gonna have to go outside where I can get a little more distance between me and a subject. Okay, what I didn't plan on, even though it's the desert and it's summertime, is that it would be insanely hot right now.
I'm dripping with sweat. But here they are, both cameras. Right now they're set up to get the exact same shot at 4K, but because of that crop factor, the EOS R is actually at 70 millimeters, the widest the lens goes, and the A7 III is at 135 millimeters since it's wider using the full frame sensor. And we're just getting shots of this mountain over here with these towers and these clouds as sweat is just dripping. Each camera is at the exact same settings. Since it's super bright out here and I don't have two ND filters that are the same, they're at f11, which isn't super ideal, with a shutter speed of 160 and an ISO of 100 to expose the shots. And I'm filming all of this on the Sony RX100 Mark V in 4K, so that way this whole video is native 4K. This is an interesting camera because it's a small point and shoot camera, but it still shoots at 100 megabits per second, just like the A7 III up here does. But it's obviously got a much smaller sensor and a different lens. The first like 50 videos on this channel were made pretty much entirely just with this camera. And now for the crop comparison, each camera is going to be at the same position with the lens at its widest focal length, which is 70 millimeters on the same subject. And then I will zoom that in to 200 millimeters. And so you can really start to see where that 1.7 times crop makes a difference on the EOS R. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is entirely up to you and your workflow.
One last thing to note is that all of that data leads to huge file sizes. Even though both cameras filmed the exact same amount of footage today, the A7 III produced 6.3 gigabytes of files, while the EOS R at 480 megabits per second produced 24.2 gigabytes of files. I specifically left out my opinion on the image quality between these two cameras because I wanted to be able to put the image directly in front of you and let you use your judgment and your opinion to decide which is best. They're both really good, that's what I will say. So it ultimately comes down to a lot of the more specific details and personal preferences based on your needs, your specific situation, which is probably going to determine which camera is best. I've really been enjoying using the EOS R, so if you missed it, I did put together a full review video, and then on top of that, I also made a video about what I think are 5 underrated features for the EOS R. So check out one of those videos, and I will see you over there.